Few cinematographers have produced a more distinctive body of work than Freddie Francis. He won 2 Oscars during his career, one for Sons and Lovers, and the other for 1989's Glory. He photographed David Lynch's Dune, The Elephant Man, and The Straight Story, Martin Scorsese's remake of Cape Fear, and the 1961 supernatural mainstay, The Innocents. He was also a director of some note, occasionally helming episodic television and a series of horror titles for Hammer Films and Amicus Productions. 2 of his directorial projects were released in 1970, the infamous Trog, which we'll discuss in a later episode, and Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly, an unhinged comic British horror film that was released in the U.S. under the abbreviated title Girly on February 12th of that year. Until his death in 2007, Francis consistently claimed that Girly was his personal favorite among all the films he directed.
I'm the Mumsy. I'm only the nanny.
My name's Sonny.
My name's Girly.
Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly are a happy family. They live in a big old house to which they bring their friends, like Soldier, and Number 5, and especially new friend. Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly are a happy family. Together, they play lots of games.
Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
The family that plays together, slays together.
Do you think you could glue his head on again, Nanny?
Girly revolves around the exploits of a wealthy British family, a mom, son, daughter, and housekeeper who reside in a Gothic countryside mansion. Like most families, they share a tradition. Only their tradition involves the kidnapping of unwitting subjects who are then challenged to integrate into this twisted clan, and when they inevitably fail to follow the rules, a member of the family blissfully disposes of them.
What the hell do I do now?
You're safe with us. We're a happy family. Come on. Eat up. The Mumsy likes having people in. Don't you like being looked after? That's naughty, mister. You're going to need to learn the rules.
Conflicts ensue when the family takes in a new victim, a character named New Friend, who turns out to be a lot more cunning than they could have expected. He strategizes and connives his way through the family's weaknesses, particularly those of the daughter of the family, Girly, who is clearly blooming into her own sexuality. His seduction of her creates great conflict within the family structure, especially when it comes time for his inevitable sacrifice.
We've still got Friend in too.
Oh, not for much longer. He's being sent to the angels.
Who says so? He hasn't had a trial.
He won't need one. Not when I tell Mumsy and Nanny certain things I know.
What sort of thing?
Mind your own business, fry your own fish. Don't poke your nose in my clean dish. Come on, out of the way.
Listen,
What?
you know that boy?
What boy's that?
You know that boy.
What boy?
That boy, Tony Chestnut.
Tony Chestnut? Who's Tony?
Girly enthusiast Darren Partridge.
Brian Comport, who wrote the screenplay, he obviously based it on Maisie Moscow's not particularly edifying Happy Family, the play which he and Freddie Francis went to see, and they didn't think it was very good, but they thought this could make a great movie. And he combined that with a very interesting book called The Law and Language of School Children by Peter and Iona Opie. And in it, it's all the phrases and all the codes that school children use. There are things they speak at a very primeval, sort of pagan level, really, a pre-pagan, very primeval sort of the darkness of childhood, I think, is also what it reveals, which is always a very uncomfortable thing for anyone. And it's one of these films where if you just sit and read the synopsis, it's like, oh, it sounds horrendous. It sounds awful, sounds really crude and quite horrific. But the film is so subtle, so multi-layered, and with such a good cast and a very, very good screenplay and direction. Every element of the film is as a tour de force of the filmmaker's art.
Understandably, having manifested from the vision of master cinematographer Freddie Francis, one of the film's greatest strengths is its photography. But Francis was not the DP on Girly. That task fell upon the shoulders of David Muir.
We had a absolute understanding from the start. He'd seen a lot of the things that I'd shot, and I'd seen, I think, just about everything he'd shot. So we had sort of mutual respect. In the pre-production period, I imagined he'd give me a very detailed briefing, exactly how he wanted each scene to be. I imagined going through each page of the script. All he said to me was, you've read the script. It's all in there. You know what to do. When I pressed him further, he said, well, no matter how dark the scene, I always want to see the eyes. And that I think is a really very wise storytelling factor. That old folk proverb about eyes are the mirror of the soul is pretty true, and it certainly works on the screen.
I mean, you talked about the eyes being the window of the soul, and I was thinking, the soul of this movie is, it's wacky. It really goes to extremes. So in terms of portraying that element of it, in regards to camera movement or kind of acceleration of the camera work in any way, what kind of considerations went into that?
Freddie had a thing about tracking shots at that stage. I don't quite know why, but that was what he was into, and I think just about every shot was a tracking shot.
The film is put together right from the opening credits, and I think they've got to be the most beautiful opening credits of any film. The long sort of panning shot, the crane shot, if you like, going through the toys at Oakley Court, in the dilapidated Oakley Court as it was at the time, really is quintessentially Francis.
Good morning, Mumsy.
Oh, good morning, Nanny. 6 o'clock already. What a lovely morning it is. Oh, why haven't you brought the dear children to give me my good morning kiss?
Master Sonny and Miss Girly were up very early, Mumsy. They're off playing. They do love their games so.
Found some new friends, most likely.
The opportunity to film Girly almost entirely at the historic Oakley Court was a big draw for Freddie Francis. It was a location he had worked at previously during his days with Hammer Films. Built in 1859, Oakley Court would go on to become one of the most photographed cinematic locations in the region, that region being the parish of Bray in the county of Berkshire. Many audiences would likely recognize it best from its prominence in the cult hit The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I screened the film a couple of times at Oakley Court, which is, of course, where 99% of the film is actually set, which is now a 5-star hotel. It's a very, very nice place, but it's still completely recognizable. Virtually every room still looks much the same as it did in Girly and in many other films. And really the only original member of the crew was that I could get hold of was Maggie Pinhorn, who was the art director. Very, very lovely lady who we managed to track down, and she kindly attended and was telling us really what it was like to work on the film. And she said that it was a fairly dismal place to work at the time, the setting, because you've probably seen Oakley Court in 100 films. It's a very famous Gothic revival mansion. she said, but obviously at the time when Hammer were using it, Hammer just being around the corner in Bray, of course, and many other production companies, it was completely dilapidated. So actually working in it, I think, was fairly unpleasant.
It had been for sale for years and nobody wanted it. So the producers hired the place for, I think it was 4 or 5 months. On the ground floor at the back, the art department had moved into a big space and had it all very cozy. They had their own heating. And they also had their own private staircase, what must have been the servants' staircase going up to the next level. So one day I needed a prop to put in front of a lamp, so I dashed down to the art department and picked up the prop, and I saw this staircase leading upwards, and I ran up the first flight, and then my legs started to feel heavy, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and the traditional chill went down my spine, and I had this feeling of cold fear, and I'm a total sort of psychic skeptic or whatever you call it, but this was too much for me, so I turned around and hurried down the stairs, back across the ground floor art department, out the side door into the wind, but even that wind was preferable to the chill I'd felt on the stairs. I ran round to the front door, up the wide main staircase, and I never tried to take those stairs again. And I never mentioned the incident, but I didn't want to look like a fool. But months later, on another shoot, I was chatting to Mike Bastow, who had been in Girly's art department, and I discovered that he'd had the same problem, and that none of the art department would use those stairs. And that's pretty incredible, because it probably saved about 5 or 6 minutes you going up these little back stairs rather than running around to the front and up the main staircase. But nobody used this shortcut, and I imagine that's why the house had remained on the market for so long and fallen so derelict. I guess maybe there were ghosts that even the real estate agents couldn't chase away.
There have been rumors of it being haunted. There have been rumors of witches holding black masses on the grounds of Oakley Court. At one point, there was either a pastor or a priest who referred to it as one of the most evil places in England. I personally found it very lovely myself.
Preston Fassel is an award-winning journalist and author who penned the first published biography of Vanessa Howard for the spring 2004 issue of Scream magazine. Miss Howard portrayed the title role in Girly, and her performance stands as the most unforgettable highlight of the film.
Vanessa Howard just captivated me, because you can tell that she really honestly believes somewhere deep down she's going to win the Oscar for this thing. Girly is the film because it is the movie where she gets to hit every single note that she was capable of. And that's something that really amazes me about it, is even some of our greatest actors and actresses do not get to hit every single note in every single film that they make. They maybe get to be the passionate bad guy, or they get to be this role or that role, and you really see her do everything in this movie. She is sinister and cunning, and she is completely mad and out of her mind, and she is completely in control of the situation, and she is a lover, and she is a killer, and she is this wide-eyed innocence, and she is this black hole of evil, and she moves between all of these things so smoothly and so naturally that it doesn't seem wrong at all. It seems perfectly natural and normal, and she just does it with such aplomb.
quite a sort of musical stage background. So she'd appeared in revues. She appeared with the Mitchell Singers, which was a very influential. Quite a few members of the Mitchell Singers were later to appear in film and TV. A lot of them had their nascent years in the Mitchell Singers, and she has this sort of almost Buster Keaton-esque ability to do really big movement. You know, she uses her body in a very dancer's in the style that a theatrical dancer would use. It is very exaggerated, but then she switches and does everything by very subtle expression, you know, almost as subtle as Michael Kitchen or Alec Guinness in playing George Smiley, where it's all done with the eyes. And it's a real, you don't see that very often in one performer.
Yeah, and we don't have 30 years of work of hers that we can look back on, and we can, so it feels even more kind of enigmatic. Where did this performance come from? Who is this? But she is so seductive and beautifully expressive, but it all feels grounded in the reality of that character.
Yes, exactly. And it's a very weird character to be. It's a real anti-heroine, because again, if you see it on paper, I mean, she commits at least 3 murders during the film, and yet you're rooting for her, even though she's clearly completely bananas and a psychopath. She is the heroine of the piece. Mm-hmm. You're rooting for her. You want her to prevail, really.
Let go of my hand. I said, let go of my hand. You've not been learning the rules.
Rules can be broken.
I thought you were trying to run for it.
No.
You must never try to run for it. Not a second time. Because if you try to run for it, we catch you. I'm not joking. We put you on trial. Probably this time.
Then what?
If we found you guilty of trying to run for it, trying a second time, if we caught you breaking one of the rules, we'd send you to the angels. You wouldn't like that.
After you watch Girly, it's difficult not to root for Vanessa Howard herself to prevail. But that wasn't to be the case, at least not in terms of her desire to build a long and productive film career. The low attendance in the UK for Girly resulted from the swells of controversy surrounding one moment in the film that lasts all of 3 seconds. The moment takes place in a zoo. Sunny feeds her sister a candy, and she proceeds to seductively wrap her lips around his finger.
There's an implied possible incestuous relationship, or that she desires that basically she's a sex maniac, and she's even her own brother is not beyond her sights, and that of course triggered a huge conservative backlash at the time. All that was missing the point of the film, and there's no coincidence that it's set in London Zoo. I think it's set there because it's kind of hinting at the bestial underlying nature of humanity, if we like.
Girly got buried at the UK cinema when it came out. So it premiered in the United Kingdom under the name of Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny and Girly. And it was Ronald J. Conn Productions who made the movie. And after seeing the dailies on this and then seeing the final product, they really thought that they had not just a horror hit on their hands, but they thought that Vanessa Howard was going to be this bona fide scream queen. And it just so happened that Girly came out at the same time as another film called Goodbye Gemini that's got Judy Geeson in it. And Goodbye Gemini is about a pair of twins, Judy Geeson, and then Martin Potter plays her brother, and the brother is in love with his sister. and is obsessed with the idea of the two of them entering into a romantic relationship because he thinks that they are actually two halves of the same person, and that if they become lovers, then they will like complete this whole. And they get involved in all of this murder and psychosexual intrigue in swinging London. And so you've got Girly up at the box office, which is about this quasi, maybe kind of sort of incestuous family. There's that implication with Sonny and Girly at the beginning with the candy. And it's just this movie about this warped family unit. And then you've got another warped family unit over here with a brother wanting to have sex with a sister. And there was this big moral backlash. It was, look at these movies that are playing in British cinemas right now. Here is what Swinging London has brought us. This is everything that is wrong with youth culture and everything that is wrong with horror culture. And very quickly, these movies disappear from the box office. Goodbye Gemini and Girly are gone. So really a lot of the blowback from that ended up indirectly falling on Vanessa Howard's shoulders.
Crestfallen that her career had stalled, Vanessa retired from the business in the early 70s. She married Rocky producer Robert Chardoff and became an unassuming and, by all accounts, personally fulfilled housewife. So distant were her movie stardom ambitions that many of her friends were unaware of her previous life. But meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, a rabid base of cult movie enthusiasts were beginning to rally around the misunderstood Girly.
The interesting thing is that it ended up coming to the United States and playing the grindhouse and exploitation film and drive-in circuit simply as Girly, and it gets a positive reception over here. Variety even ends up writing this positive piece about it, of all places. And it did fairly well with the 42nd Street crowd and with the drive-in crowd, and as I found out in the beginning and came back around to later, it ended up getting into the hands of the U.S. Armed Forces somehow, and there were real circulating on bases for movie night for American soldiers. And so it doesn't become the spectacular phenomenon in the United States, but it does become something of a brief cult phenomenon over here in the early 70s. And Vanessa Howard does not know this. She never knew until much later in life what kind of reception it had gotten in the States.
But before she did pass, you're saying that she did have a sense that there was this rabid kind of underground appreciation of her?
Yes, and unfortunately, it was in some of the last years of her life. Actually, at the time she passed away, she was in negotiations with Scorpion Releasing, which was the DVD reissue house that owns, as far as I know, currently owns the rights to Girly on DVD. And she was trying to get to their studios to record a commentary for the film. And she eventually ended up passing away from complications of a COPD. And at the time they wanted her to record, it had gotten to such an advanced state that she was not well enough to travel by plane to go record a commentary.
In retrospect, it's not surprising that Girly was not an overnight sensation. After all, it has all the makings of an underground cult hit. Even those audiences that haven't seen the film yet have likely witnessed its reverberations throughout film culture. You can see not-so-subtle callbacks to key moments in the film in other movies like The Shining and Fatal Attraction. But the generations of audiences that have discovered the film since its failed initial release have fallen in love with the enchanting and horrifying dimensions of Howard's lead performance, the Looney Tunes tone of its dysfunctional family portrait, and the deceptive depth of its messaging.
I mean, there are so many layers to the movie and so many messages on it. You know, it's been compared to imperialism. It was considered as an expression of the issues with the Vietnam War at the time. I believe it was initially, its first screening was actually at Harvard University, which shows how, it was very much an academic exercise. Freddie Francis considered it as a comic horror academic exercise, and it really was an allegory of so many things: British class structure, bullying, the sex battle, the happy family in the Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny and Girly house is, one element of that is that that dichotomy between the existing older, if you like, the older generation's power and the younger generation's sexual power and subversion of that. You could go on forever about what the film means. I think it's almost infinite how you interpret it, which is another part of its appeal.
Another point of interest for big movie fans with Girly is the fact that it's directed by someone who in later years would become one of the great cinematographers, Freddie Francis.
That was his baby. This was the one movie where he had complete creative control over it, where he worked with Brian Comport on the script, and the script was exactly what he wanted. And there's not a shot or a moment in that movie that's not what Freddie Francis wanted it to be. And that was his absolute favorite film of his own because it was totally his baby.
It was Freddie Francis's masterpiece in the traditional sense, as in it was, like an apprentice proving themselves, proving what they could absolutely do at the height of their powers. He went on to make some fantastic films like The Elephant Man, but I think that demonstrates his, he was given, and virtually everyone in it, I think, is given free rein. Vanessa Howard's given free rein to act as she chose, really, and completely plays to her strengths. The other actors clearly seem to be enjoying themselves. The cinematography, the music, and Freddie's direction. I think the whole thing is a great spree. It's a great celebration of that kind of artistic freedom.
Vanessa Howard is Girly, and Girly takes up where Baby Jane leaves off. Everyone's dying to meet Girly. Rated R.